Happy Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day 2025. Valentine's Day, probably, I want to say 1973, 74. My father came home from his job as assistant library director of the Rapides Parish Library System in Alexandria, Louisiana. And he brought home candy and flowers from my mother on Valentine's Day. And he brought home something for me. I always thought it was so sweet that my father thought of me on Valentine's Day when I was a young lad. Probably he just saw this book and thought, hey, this is perfect for Paul. This is the book. This is the actual copy of it. It had a dust jacket. The dust jacket's gone. Long gone. The book is called The Great Comic Book Heroes by Jules Feiffer. And this, my friends, is the book that started it all for me. Yes, this is where I got my love of comics history. And in a sense, my love of comics. I didn't know really what had come before, but this was my first exposure to it. This book is a collection of reprints of classic Golden Age comic book stories selected by Jules Feiffer. And Jules Feiffer passed away not too long ago. When I published my book Screwball, which you can see over there, kind of in the corner over there next to Rembrandt, I sent him a copy with a sincere, note to say, hey, it was getting this book that led to the creation of Screwball. I can say that he did not write me back, but I know that I had the right address because I got it through a close contact, a reliable contact. And he did, however, write to Pete Maresca about the Thimble Theater book that Sunday Press did. And in the front of that book, I wrote a biography of E.C. Segar, at least up to the point of the material that's in the book. It's the pre-Popeye Thimble Theater Sundays. And I was able to include some original research and some things I found that about Segar, little tidbits I hadn't seen anywhere else, and include some nice things from an unpublished interview with Segar. Anyway, Feiffer wrote Pete and said, hey, he really liked the book. Thanked him for sending it, and he said he especially liked that introduction. So, good enough for me. The Great Comic Book Heroes, Jules Feiffer. Now, this you'll see here also by Feiffer. I knew who Feiffer was, I think, before I got this book, because in my parents' library there were copies of books like this, which were, I was a fanatic for cartoons. That's why my dad got me that book, and comics. And my parents had a large collection of cartoon books, mostly in paperback. This one is not from that collection. None of those copies remain in my possession, but this is what the books were like. And I really liked these books. I had never read comics like this before. And they were basically, they were very sophisticated. And it was kind of a secret peek into the world of grown-ups and the things that they were really concerned with. But it was done in the medium of comics, almost childish drawing style. And I just thought that was really fascinating, and I still do. And of course, now that I'm older, I can read these things, and I'm a card-carrying adult, at least according to some. And these things make a lot of sense, and they're very funny. They're very satirical. Some of them are of the times, and some of them are timeless. Feiffer, I think my parents had copies of some of his novels as well on their shelves, but I didn't tackle those. And but so I knew that he was a kind of like a respected bigwig cartoonist, and that was neat that he liked comics. He liked the superhero comics and the old stuff. Now, I had seen, like a few reprints of the origin story of Batman and the origin story of Superman. Those were around. You could find them. But there's stuff in here that I didn't know about. So here's a peek at the table of contents. And you see there's 13 stories. And the presentation is very different than what you would see today in a comic book reprint book. They don't tell you where the stories are from, like where they first appeared. Nothing like that. And in fact, the reproduction is different. It's been recolored, process colored, or spot colored. I can never get those two terms straight in my head. You give me two different things and I will always mix them up. You tell me to turn left and there's a 50-50 chance I'm going to turn right. Yeah. So, but you get a sense of that these things are readable, even if they're not, the best quality. They're not the worst quality. They're very readable and they're very thrilling and exciting. And I got to show you a few things in here. The one thing that really stood out, there's two things that stood out, okay? The first one was in the back is the Spirit story. I'd never heard of the Spirit. And that splash page just rocked my world. It turned it upside down. I had never in my life seen a splash page like that. Look at those giant tall letters, and the characters are actually inhabiting the space as though they were some kind of a structure, a statuary or a building. There's doors down here where there's characters coming and going through them, and the whole thing is so weird and exotic. And who's this character standing right here? That must be the Spirit. It's like, holy cow, what a great splash page. And it's set, you can see that it's set in some sort of Middle Eastern type setting by the way people are dressed, and the arch of the door, and it's sort of a Taj Mahal type look, and the lettering here is the calligraphy. It's done in a calligraphic style. I mean, the whole thing is just beautiful graphic design. In those letters especially. Just, man, that was like, well, I don't even know how to explain it. It was wonderful. And the whole story was wonderful. And the other one, I said there were two that really got me in here. And the other one, let me find it. We got Superman, we got Batman, we got Captain America's origin story. And we have the origin story of Plastic Man. This one also turned my understanding of the medium of comics on its head. Here is a superhero story told with great style, great humor, and yet it still captures all the action and all the excitement and all the heroism that I loved as a kid about these stories, all the adventure. It's a combination of adventure and humor I've only ever seen done so masterfully in one other place, which is the Popeye comics that E.C. Segar did. So I was a Plastic Man fan, but that's a story for another day. Now, the thing about, well, there's a couple of things I want to say. You probably know this already, but Feiffer, well, he wrote an introduction to the book. Let's go there. And it's not just an introduction that goes on for a page or two. Okay? It's an introduction that goes on for 10 chapters. Short chapters. But it starts with page 11 and it ends on page 53. And so it's a relatively substantial essay on the material that's in the book, but not really. What it really is it's a very dense, rich, complex essay about the magic that was present in the golden age of comic books in the 40s, late 30s, through the 40s, at least through World War II. And what it was like to grow up in America at that time, and what the advent of the comics meant, what cartooning meant back then to a young person. And Feiffer, of course, became a cartoonist. And so it also talks about how he got into the industry. And you know this already. Guess where he wound up? He wound up in the studio of Will Eisner, working for Will Eisner on The Spirit, which I'm sure everybody knows, but I'll just say for anybody who might not know, this ran as a insert in Sunday newspapers, and you could fold it and make your own comic book with it. And it included art by Jules Feiffer. He had a comic strip called Clifford that ran in there. And Klaus Nordling had Lady Luck, and Bob Powell had Mr. Mystic. But those are stories for another day. By the way, happy Valentine's Day. It's this gift from my wife. One time, Feiffer even drew one of those amazing splash pages. So he wound up writing a lot of the Spirit stories after working his way up from the bottom ranks, being an office boy. Here it is. And it's fantastic if you read this. This is Feiffer's childish art drawing again, right? But the humor is quite sophisticated. This prefigures Mad Magazine. This is 1950, right? Mad comes along in what, 52? So it's a parody of a comic. What's even greater is it's being published in the series of that same comic. So Feiffer did the first few pages, and then Will Eisner took over in this story. Anyway, before my phone, which I'm recording this on, runs out of battery life, I want to give you a taste of this introduction because the writing on it is beautiful. But before I do, I want to talk about the 3 different editions that I know of this book. The first one came out in 1965. It was published by Dial Press. The second one, which is what this is, came out from the reprint house called Bonanza, which did cheap knockoffs. I don't have a year on it. They didn't include a year in the publication page, but I think it was the early 70s. And then the third version that I know about came out from Fantagraphics, and they did a trade paper version, which I recommend that you seek out and find this essay if you can. Comic books, World War II, the Depression, and I all got going at roughly the same time. I was 8. Detective Comics was on the stands. Hitler was in Spain, and the middle class, by whose employment record we gauge depressions, look at that right there. I mean, this is not written for kids, folks. Was, after short gains, again out of work. I mention these items in tandem, not only to give color to the period, but as a sly historic survey to those in our own time who, of the items cited, only know of comic books. So I had to kind of rewind that when I was looking at this last night. So he mentions detectives on the stand, Detective Comics on the stands. Hitler's in Spain. Yeah, I didn't know that. And I also didn't know that the middle class was, again, out of work in the late 30s. I thought, the Depression, there had been recovery. So yeah, the only thing I know about is the comic books. 8 was a bad age for me. Only a year earlier, I'd won a gold medal in the John Wanamaker Art Contest for a crayon drawing on oak tag paper of Tom Mix jailing an outlaw. So at 7, I was a winner and didn't know how to handle it. Not that triumph isn't at any age hard to handle, but the younger you are, the more of a shock it is to learn that it simply doesn't change anything. Grown-ups still wielded all the power, still could not be talked back to, still were always right, however many times they contradicted themselves. By 8, I had become a politician of the grown-up, indexing his mysterious ways and hiding underground my lust for getting even until I was old enough, big enough, and important enough to make a bid for it. That bid was to come by way of a career. I knew I'd never grow up big enough to beat up everybody. My hope was to somehow own everything and fire everybody. The career I chose, the only one that seemed to fit the skills I was then sure of, a mild reading ability mixed with a mild drawing ability, was comics. That resonates. So I came to the field with more serious intent than my opiate-minded contemporaries. While they, in those pre-super days, were eating up Cosmo, Phantom of Disguise, Speed Saunders, and Bart Reagan's Spy, I was counting how many frames there were to a page, and how many pages there were to a story, learning how to form, for my own use, phrases like ampersand, capital X, pound sign, question mark, slant, Grolix for cussing. Marking for future reference which comic book hero was swiped from which radio hero. Buck Marshall from Tom Mix, the Crimson Avenger from the Green Hornet. Anyway, that gives you a flavor for how specific and how well written and what a trip down memory lane this is. But it also holds great insights which are applicable even today. He's talking about the root of something that has blossomed into our culture, full blown, and doesn't show any signs of slowing down if you want to judge by the success of the Marvel movies. He talks about Batman and Superman and all the heroes that are in this book and many others from a sophisticated point of view, which was remarkable in the mid-60s. Here he's talking about Fiction House. Its single feature of interest was Hawk of the Seas, signed by Willis Renzi, Eisner spelled backwards. Hawk was a pirate feature, notable only as a trial run for the Spirit, full of the Baroque angle shots that Eisner introduced to the business. Sartorially, the Spirit was miles apart from other masked heroes. He didn't wear tights, just a baggy blue business suit, a wide-brimmed blue hat that needed blocking, and, for a disguise, a matching blue eye mask, drawn as if it were a skin graft. For some reason, he rarely wore socks, or if he did, they were flesh-colored. I often wondered about that. And in the midst of this amazing essay, he talked about drawing his first comics, and he even reproduces the cover of one of them. Radio Comics, #1. This also rocked my world because I thought, gee, those drawings are pretty primitive. I think I can draw at least that good. And that's how this guy got started. So it was an inspiration to me to see this. And I love it. I love the energy and the excitement that's captured in this. I think it's fantastic. And of course, it echoes, it resonates, it foreshadows artists like CF, right? Gary Panter. This is kind of part of what their art is about, is getting to that core, you know, getting down to it and letting your hand do it. So this is a fantastic book, and I highly recommend it. The Great Comic Book Heroes by Jules Feiffer. Thank you, Jules.